This video is basically how to determine what kind of snake do you have in front. And I'm basically limiting myself to the nootropics, which is where I did a lot of my work with snakes. But this also applies to a lot of other parts of the world, and also my level of taxonomical knowledge is a little bit outdated. So there was a lot of changes due to phylogeny. So this could have slightly been different. So snakes is a group that I always really like, and I remember in my class, people always in my group of reptile and amphibian um, obs- reptile and amphibian obsessed people or herpers. Um, they always asked me which snake I thought something was, and I basically developed a reputation for knowing just by a quick browse or a quick look what type of snake we had, even though I was not entirely always correct. I developed a reputation for somebody who knew how to identify snakes quickly. So really, there are four major groups in Costa Rica. They're the rare fang snakes, colubrids. There's a couple more, but these are usually the most commonly encountered in the field. There are adders and vipers, viperidae. There are coral snakes, and they like elapidse. And then there's boas or voids. And really, the the first three that are relatively easy to know which group they are the elapidse, the viperids, and the boids. I think the fourth group, the colubridae, it's really difficult. It's really large. And a lot of people disagree over the taxonomy of it, so I'm not entirely sure where exactly they are right now. But with with the parrots, usually it comes down to the. Hey, how are you doing?
Take a good picture, man.
Yeah, it really comes down to the fangs that they have here. So usually the vipers and the adders have front fangs right here that have venom, and then they have small scales in the head. The small scales in the hair is critical. Some people use a triangular head as a way to determine, but this is not always accurate. There's something called leptodeira, which is a cat-eyed snake, and has a little bit of a triangular head, and it's not a viperid, it's a colubrid, and it's not poisonous. There's something else called a Trypanurgus compressus. I think the name already changed. This is also a non-poisonous snake, and it seems to have a triangular head. There's the Fars fertilans, and it also has a triangular head. So it really just comes down to the scaling of the head of the head scales. Usually when they're small, some people use the eye, but this is not entirely always the case. Like people sometimes say, like if it has a vertical eye pupil, it's a poisonous snake. If it has a round one, doesn't. I don't really agree with this. Usually the best way is just to see the teeth here and to see the scaling. But I think for the regular person, it's just too hard to determine any of this. There's a lot of noise right now, so I'm going to go a little bit further away. So for those reasons, For those reasons, scaling and the teeth are like some of the easiest ways. Usually vipers are not that fast. They're just slow moving snakes, vipers and adders. And there's also old world vipers, like here where I am right now in Britain, we have adders. The adder found in England, for example, is not that dangerous, I just heard. So the venom that it has is called hemotoxic venom. And the composition of this venom is a little bit different from the coral snakes, which is neurotoxic venom. Usually the neurotoxic venom is a lot, check out the ocean, is a lot much more effective than the hemotoxic venom. However, the hemotoxic venom is also very dangerous. And even though the snakes here and many of the pit vipers are not entirely, many of the eyelash pit vipers or the arboreal snakes are not lethal or deadly, a lot of the ground snakes, like such as the bushmaster, the rattlesnake are deadly, and if they bite you in the right way, if you don't get treated as quickly as possible, there's a chance that you can die. That being said, the deadliest snakes are in the coral group, the elapidse and the cobra snakes. But I'm going to get back to that into a second. So going back to the vipers, hanging out in the ground, usually not, sometimes in trees. Sometimes they go up to highland elevations, such as the one that's green and blue, one that's green and black, and definitely dangerous. Then we go to the elapides, and the elapids are basically the coral snakes. I think for Costa Rica there's at least 4. If you include the sea snake, Pelamis platurus or planurus, I forgot, you have 5. And this has a deadly bite. Usually the venom is here, so they have to, instead of just a quick bite, then they really have to chew on the prey in order to inject the venom. So one bite is not as dangerous as the one from the vipers. However, they are very easy to spot because they have all this bright coloration. So instead of trying to hide in the bush and then attack and then try to camouflage in, they're actually very showy. They're very easy to tell, and they just tell everybody that I'm dangerous because they have all the colors. And cobras and some of the most dangerous snakes in Australia, such as the taipan, the tiger snake, all belong to this group of snakes, the coral snake group. The next snake, the next group of, and they have a neurotoxic venom which is highly deadly. The next group of snakes that is relatively dangerous is the relatively non-dangerous is the boids. So boids usually are constrictors, and instead of hunting the prey and then grabbing it, they usually look for larger prey, and then they use their body in order to coil around it and make it stop breathe. For example, like as you've seen in the tails of the python or the anacondas. But a lot of the smaller ones usually are not as they're not as they don't use constriction as much as some of the other ones. I've seen some boas like hunt, for example, basiliscus or tinosaurs, and that's actually very neat to see them, how they hunt and how they like coil around it and slowly digest it. And obviously, the biggest snake I found in Costa Rica, I believe, is the boa constrictor. The biggest lethal snake is the bushmaster. So the boas, I think, can range, at least in Costa Rica, up to 10 meters. These are the largest group of snakes. I believe the largest snake in the world longest is a python, and the heaviest is an anaconda, but I have to double check. And the constrictors are relatively slow, and sometimes I understand that because they're still chewing on their prey and it takes a long time. Sometimes there's a lot of bacteria in their mouth, so if they bite you, you can get infected not from the venom that they have inside of their teeth, but from the toxins of the bacteria that they have on their mouth. So this is one of the reasons why people just end up trying to avoid snakes altogether, even though they're poisonous or non-poisonous. And they're usually relatively arboreal. Sometimes they're in the ground. And I think they're very iconic. Like everybody has heard of anacondas or pythons or boas. And in the old world, the pythons are a very big group. In the new world, anacondas and boas are like some of the biggest. It's like once I saw an anaconda in the Amazon, I was very excited about it. Then we go. The scales in the head are usually very small. So usually if they have small scales in the head, small eyes, and then a robust body, you know it's a boid. It's in the boid group. Then the next group of snakes is the one I like the most are the colubrids. And colubrids or colubridae, true snakes, such as the grass snake found here in England. I believe the genus is Natrix. I think have been subdivided into more groups. So this is all taxonomy, but this is rare fang snakes. And at least in Costa Rica, there are two that are relative. They have a little bit of venom. Conophyes lineatus is considered to be a relatively venomous, non-venomous snake, if that can be said. And there's one more, but I'm forgetting which one it is. And then you have the very stylized, very beautiful snakes that have like long bodies that coil, that hunt. Many times they are specialized on frogs, such as Leptophis eats a lot of frogs, the parrot snakes. They specialize on birds such as Celestis, the bird-eating snake. They specialize on like young birds. Snail-eating snakes such as Sibon have the big eyes to look for them at night. The lizard-eating snakes such as the Mantoes anchoa, the vine snake, it also has other names. And then you have all this enormous group of ground snakes that are also associated with just fast running. So, for example, racers are in this group, and Silostes pulatus, for example, which is a relatively fast running snake, is in this group. Trying to think of other iconic examples. There's one snake called Ungaleophis, and I heard anecdotal data that it actually is people sought after. And one guy I worked with that actually catches snakes for a living, sometimes poaches them illegally. There was some reference that he made quite a lot on it, something up to like several $1,000. I don't know if this information is correct, at least for Ungaleophis. For the sea, so this is basically the whole group Colubridae, which is very speciose. I think for Costa Rica there's like 120, 130 species of snakes. That's nothing compared to, say, for example, England. I think there's at least 130 species of colubrids. I think there's more, including the banana snakes. I think for England there's about only like 5 to 10 species of snakes, which is not that much where I am right now. So usually, when do we find snakes? We find snakes usually in the spring when they come out of their hibernation, and they usually need to fast, they need to eat, but because they have wrongly called cold blood, they don't spend that much time hunting as mammals and birds. So they rely on the energy from the sun sometimes to accelerate their metabolism, and they eat quite a lot less um, in relation to their body than a mammal or a bird, which is uh, more wrongly called warm-blooded organism, because the blood really just is has more to do with their diet and their metabolism than the temperature of the blood themselves. There are other groups of snakes that are not well known and they're not entirely that representative, but these are usually the four main group of snakes found in Costa Rica and many parts of the world.